arrhythmias. Today we are going to talking about 6 steps of EKG interpretation. But before we start, if this is your first time to the channel and you want to see more education content like this, please do subscribe my channel and hit the bell icon. So let's start with the PQRST. Here we have a small bump right here called P wave, followed by the stall structure right here called the QRS complex, and lastly the last bump after the QRS complex will be the T wave. Let's discuss them one by one. The P wave represents atrial depolarization. During atrial depolarization, the two atrias are contracting. Next up, the QRS complex. Now the QRS complex represents ventricular depolarization. During ventricular depolarization, the ventricles of the heart are contracting. Depolarization is for contracting. So, how would you know which one is which? That P wave is for atria, while the QRS is for ventricle. So, if you look at the diagram right here, the QRS complex, it kind of look like an inverted V. So, V for ventricle. So, we see a QRS complex. Think about ventricular depolarization. And lastly, we have T wave. The T wave represents ventricular repolarization. This is when the ventricles are relaxing. Keep in mind that every depolarization is always followed by the repolarization. So for every contraction will be followed by relaxation. Now the question is, where is atrial repolarization? If QRS represents ventricular depolarization or contraction and T wave represents ventricular repolarization or relaxation, then where is atrial repolarization? Well, it can be found within the QRS. As you can see, the QRS complex, it's a tall structure because ventricles tends to contract stronger than the atria. They tend to make the atrial repolarization. And so that being said, atrial repolarization and relaxation takes place after the P wave, which can be found within the QRS complex. Now, as a review, the P wave stands for atrial depolarization. The QRS complex represents ventricular depolarization. The T wave represents ventricular repolarization, and the atrial repolarization is covered by the QRS complex. You cannot see it, but it exists.